Hello, faint starlight. Um, I I find it interesting how controversial subjects often are not really those that are complicated for people. They are things that people think they understand really clear, and so they can't understand other people's opinions very well because it just seems so damn clear to them. Well, I'm not really different, but I don't have either that pro-life or pro-choice view that you represented. I am pro-choice, but not this radical abortion is not no big deal. Just go ahead, yeah, go do it. I don't think there's many people like that, but that's not what I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about what's clear to me, what actually is clear to me in this same sense that I don't see the subtlety that that makes it complicated. But because I'm a relativist and philosophical, I am able to understand where other people are coming from, but I don't actually have any personal sympathy. It doesn't have any emotional weight for me, the fact. As a matter of fact, before I get into my thing, I'll say one thing I think that makes people pro-life is a view that a woman's purpose is mothering. And I think it's possible to have a really positive version of that, because I'm a relativist. I believe in purpose that we define. So when a man or a woman defines part of their purpose as parenting, I think that's a beautiful thing. But it's different than an actual teleology. Teleology has been more or less debunked from a point of view of animal philosophy. Teleology, I think you probably know, but for those that don't, it's the view that everything has a purpose, that everything's here for a purpose. Okay, and if you believe that women's purpose is to mother, then it's easy to ignore this aspect that makes me pro-choice, which is a medical aspect. You don't see it as a medical thing because it's the woman's purpose. Just like we don't see, growing bigger as a medical thing because it's so natural. But of course, it can be a medical thing, and growing pains and childhood diseases that you have to get through. Anyway, tangent. Okay. So I think having the teleological view of the role of women is what softens people up to not really realize that basically a person, any human, has the right to remove anything they want from their body. And the distinctions between a cancer and a parasite and an organ are really up to the individual. If you want to remove your appendix, then you can remove your appendix. Now, the interesting thing is, though, that this doesn't add up to a right to abort. Okay? It doesn't actually add up to a right to abort. It adds up to a right to remove the fetus whenever you want. And that means just the removal. If the baby is removed, I don't know of a way to say that the mother or anybody has a right to have the baby killed at that point, aborted in that sense. So this will set up a complicated situation, or already does, for humans, deciding, well, when do we try to keep that embryo or fetus alive? I mean, we can already fertilize eggs, so we can already start at the egg. We're not so good at the womb part, but if we ever have an artificial womb, which I think we will have, we'll be able to keep an embryo or fetus alive from day one, but it might not be cheap. But I don't think that the expense will weigh on the mother's decision. It'll be a moral decision for society. Then we really have to decide, does every embryo should be saved at the cost of a couple $1,000,000? What if it gets down to $5 or $10? What if it turns out to be easy once we figure out how to do it, to build artificial wombs and you just plug them in, and for the price of a light bulb? See, there's all kinds of social consequences there because, again, I think it's mostly a myth. There are some people you can use as anecdotal, but it's mostly statistically, it's just very rare to use abortion as a birth control, just to be sloppy. And I think it's less and less likely as people use birth control, for to prevent transmitted sexual diseases. I mean, I could imagine that if it was that easy, then but people might use it, and especially if they knew that the baby, the embryo, was not going to be killed. They might like that. So anyway, so yeah, I think that it's a medical decision to have a personal choice of whether something lives off your body. And it is hard. Heart surgery is a hard decision to make. It's hard to know whether or not to vaccinate your kids for some people. If you read up on that literature, it gives you doubts about any number of things. And it kind of seems like a high percentage, a few percent of people die in every surgery just because of being put under the anesthetic. That's a big decision. Every medical decision is life and death, and it is hard. But and it's interesting to think about what would you do and what would you advise people in your family and stuff. But once it gets to people, just individual fellow citizens, they have to have medical autonomy. They get to decide whether they have those surgeries, which life and death risks they take. And if you think of it as the right to remove the child or the embryo or the fetus from the woman, for the woman to have it removed, then she's not making a life or death. She's not making the life or death decision about the fetus. The consequences are simply the natural consequences about what environment does she bring that baby out into, and including the social context. And then the natural consequences of her action are based on that environment. Suppose it's related to the right to give children up for adoption, that you're responsible for them unless you officially give them up to adoption, and somebody else will take responsibility.